Tonight, the White House insists it's not a reversal of policy, but the president leaves the door open to prosecuting some Bush administration officials for the harsh interrogation of terror suspects.
This has been a difficult chapter in our history.
I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the man the police say is the Craigslist killer. The clean-cut medical student charged with a brutal murder, how detectives tracked him down. A teenage Somali becomes the first person charged in the U.S. with piracy in more than a century. Why it's such a difficult crime to prosecute. And what baby boomers are doing to get and keep jobs in our special series, Rethinking Retirement.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. We begin tonight with the topic of torture. President Obama said CIA interrogators who used harsh tactics on terror suspects will not be prosecuted. That was last week. Today, in a surprise move, the president indicated a different policy may apply to officials who approve those tactics. Our justice correspondent Bob Orr tells us they may face charges.
The president's remarks were stunning, suggesting for the first time he's open to prosecuting Bush administration officials for sanctioning harsh interrogations of terror suspects.
I would say that that is going to be more of a decision for the Attorney General within the parameters of various laws, and I don't want to prejudge that.
The White House later denied the president had reversed policy, but numerous Obama administration officials, including the president himself, have said they're not looking to put the Bush team on trial.
President-elect Obama has said it well. We don't want to criminalize policy differences that might exist between the outgoing administration and the administration that is about to take over.
Republicans pounced on what they saw as a flip-flop.
What is the policy or the position of the administration? Because now it seems to be somewhat confusing.
The president's remarks came just days after his administration made public so-called torture memos, which revealed 3 top al-Qaeda operatives had been waterboarded more than 260 times. Attorney General Holder pledged no CIA interrogator will be prosecuted. But now those who wrote the memos may be at risk. Still, CBS News legal analyst Andrew Cohen says prosecutions are unlikely.
I just don't see that as a viable option. Remember, the president, even as he's not ruling it out, is urging people to reflect but not have any retribution. Retribution is criminal prosecution.
The legal opinions of Bush Justice Department lawyers Jay Bybee, John Yoo, and Stephen Bradbury were drafted to support the policies of more senior officials. Attorneys General John Ashcroft and Alberto Gonzales, CIA Director George Tenet, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, and ultimately President Bush and Vice President Cheney. For his part, Cheney is unapologetic for pushing the interrogations that some have labeled torture.
They didn't put out the memos that show the success of the effort. And there are reports that show specifically what we gained as a result of this activity.
The president today also signaled he could support a congressional investigation into the Bush terror policies as long as that's nonpartisan. But Democrats are pushing a so-called Truth Commission, and Republicans want no part of that. Katie?
Bob Orr in Washington, thank you. Jeff Greenfield is our senior political correspondent. Jeff, even the slightest hint about criminal proceedings triggered a very strong reaction, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think the reason is it's so unusual to even think about one administration prosecuting a past administration for what Eric Holder called a policy difference. I mean, bribery, sure. Even Watergate was flat-out obstruction of justice. But, by the way, even when it's been done, it's usually, by coincidence, the same political party, like the Ford administration and the Nixon people. So for different political parties to have one prosecuting the other, I don't think we've ever seen this, and that's why even the hint of it got people so, I don't know, exercised.
And how much pressure do you think the Obama administration is getting to hold Bush officials accountable?
Clearly from some of its most liberal supporters there is that, and that's why today, as he has in the past, the president seemed to be hinting at some kind of nonpartisan truth commission or not a real congressional committee, because I think what they're worried about in the White House is a Senate Intelligence Committee investigation, very partisan. The Office of Professional Responsibility is going to apparently come up with some very critical reviews of what the Bush people did. You have the prospect of an impeachment, because one of these lawyers is now a federal judge. I got to believe this is the last kind of partisan wrangle that the Obama administration wants, But there is this demand on the part of some of his people to say, hey, these guys did bad things, let's hold them to account.
All right. Jeff Greenfield. Jeff, thanks very much. Okay. Now to another big challenge for the Obama administration. Ever since the government started handing out taxpayer money to bail out the financial industry, the nagging question has been, where did that money go? Today, the TARP watchdog warned 1 out of 10 of those dollars could be lost to fraud. Here's our chief White House correspondent, Chip Reed.
When Congress authorized $700 billion to bail out the banks last fall, critics predicted the fund would be raided by crooks. Now there's evidence they might have been right. A new government report says investigators have opened 20 criminal probes into the bailout program on everything from securities fraud to insider trading to public corruption.
Some of these are just plain old scam artists. Exactly. Drawn like flies to honey.
Neil Barofsky, who's leading the investigation, says that with so much honey in the pot, he's not surprised.
It is an inevitable part of human nature when you see this much money going out in this short period of time. There are going to be those that are drawn to steal, to cheat, to commit fraud.
Barofsky says the rule of thumb in government programs is that 10% is lost to fraud. The bank bailout program started at $700 billion, but with all the loans and loan guarantees that were later added, he says it's now closer to $3 trillion. Losing 10% of that, he says, would be devastating.
We'd be up hundreds of billions of dollars in losses just to fraud. So we're working real hard to make sure that doesn't happen.
On Capitol Hill today, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner defended the bailout program as he was peppered with questions.
You've left more questions unanswered than answered.
Geithner said the vast majority of banks now have the money they need to operate, noting that some banks already want to pay their bailout money back.
We would welcome, capital coming back to the Treasury and the taxpayer as a result of the effectiveness of these programs.
But some members of the Congressional Oversight Panel were left more than a little skeptical.
For those who maintain that the taxpayer will actually make money on this deal, number one, I hope you're right. And number two, as history as my guide, I severely doubt it.
Sources say the first indictment in the bank bailout investigation is expected soon, possibly this week. Chip Reed, CBS News, the White House.
Now to a very different government concern, this one involving national security. Computer spies have reportedly stolen information about the F-35, the fighter jet being developed for the Air Force, the Navy, and several U.S. allies. The hackers stole data on the plane's design and electronic systems, possibly to build one of their own. Chinese spies are suspected. Today, Defense Secretary Robert Gates downplayed the report when I interviewed him for an upcoming 60 Minutes report.
I would just address it generally. We are under cyber attack virtually all the time, every day here. We think we have pretty good control of our sensitive information, both with respect to intelligence and equipment systems. But we, like everybody else, is under attack. Banks are under attack. Every country is under attack. It's sometimes very difficult to figure out a home address on these attacks. So one of the things that I'm doing in this budget is significantly increasing the resources for cyber experts. We're going to more than quadruple the number of experts that we have in this area, and we're devoting a lot more money to it. We're looking at some structural changes here in the building. This is going to be an enduring problem, and it is going to be a challenge, not just for the Department of Defense, but for the entirety of the United States.
This is a $300 billion program. So how big a blow is this if a country like China accesses this information and can defend itself against these aircraft?
I think that based on what I've been briefed, I believe we still have security of the sensitive systems.
So you don't believe too much information was gleaned by the Chinese?
I don't know exactly how much information was gleaned, but I think that the sensitive elements have continued to be protected, mainly because they're back here.
Now to the case known as the Craigslist murder. A masseuse who advertised online was beaten and shot to death in a Boston hotel room. Tonight, a suspect is being held without bail. He's an unlikely suspect, a medical student with a clean record engaged to be married. Here's Daniel Seberg.
A violent predator who stalked women in cold blood. That's how police describe 22-year-old Philip Markoff. The clean-cut suspect stood calm and emotionless in a Boston courtroom as authorities accused him of being the Craigslist killer.
April 14, 2009, bashed in the head of Julissa Brisman and shot her 3 times close range.
Brisman advertised for massage services on Craigslist, the internet's version of newspaper classifieds. Police say Markoff met her in a hotel room and killed her in a botched robbery.
It appears that Ms. Brisman put up a fight. She sustained blunt head trauma to her skull.
Markoff, who had no prior criminal record, faces charges of armed robbery, kidnapping, and murder. Police believe he's responsible for a similar robbery in the Boston area and another in Warwick, Rhode Island. The brutal portrayal is a far cry from the fun-loving photos on Markoff's Facebook page and a website celebrating his summer wedding plans.
Philip Markoff is not guilty of the charges. He has his family's support.
Markoff was arrested with his fiancée in the car. She's reportedly standing by him. His neighbors in an upscale condo complex outside Boston are stunned.
You know, being a single girl, it's definitely eerie and unsettling.
Police searching his apartment found a semi-automatic weapon and duct tape, plus evidence from Markoff's computer that was allegedly used to contact the women.
This guy left himself open. He left electronic fingerprint.
In a statement, Craigslist says it's working to improve safety for our users and the general public. As Markoff remains jailed without bond, authorities say there may be more victims involved and are asking them to come forward. Daniel Seberg, CBS News, Boston.
And still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, baby boomers try to turn back the clock in this tough job market. Our special series, Rethinking Retirement. But up next, his smile turned to tears in the courtroom. A teenage pirate from Somalia faces an American judge. In federal court here in New York today, a 5'2" teenager went before a judge and was accused of piracy, conspiracy, and hostage taking. The Somali was captured during that failed hijacking of a U.S. cargo ship. If convicted, he could face life in prison. Here's our chief investigative correspondent, Armin Katayan.
Handcuffed and shackled, Abdiwali Moussay arrived in a pouring rain to a cold, hard New York City welcome late last night, on his way to becoming the first person to be charged with piracy in this country in more than a century. Moussay, the suspected ringleader, is the sole survivor of a Navy SEALs operation that left 3 other pirates dead and led to the release of Captain Richard Phillips.
Thank you very much.
Today in federal court, Moussay was visibly shaken. After a closed-door hearing, the judge ruled Moussay was at least 18 years old, an adult old enough to stand trial, despite the fact Moussay's mother told the AP her son was just 16.
The 2 biggest issues are the young man's age and whether he is properly taken into the custody of the United States in the first place.
The piracy charge falls under an obscure federal law dating to 1819, 60 years before the invention of the light bulb. But as pirate attacks have surged, 102 and counting already this year, bringing pirates to justice has proven to be anything but easy.
Under the laws of the sea, any country can prosecute piracy. It just becomes a challenge to identify which country wants to and can accept them for prosecution.
Witness last weekend after a group of pirates attacked a Norwegian tanker off the coast of Somalia.
Fire!
The Canadian Navy spent 7 hours hunting the pirates down, only to release them because the Canadians can only arrest pirates who attack Canadian ships. Moussay is one who didn't get away, well on his way to becoming the most famous pirate since Blackbeard. Armin Katayan, CBS News, New York.
At the White House, a reunion today for former President Bill Clinton and Senator Ted Kennedy. They weren't getting along after Kennedy endorsed Barack Obama for president instead of Hillary Clinton. But today, the senator and Mr. Clinton joined President Obama as he signed a new law named for Kennedy. It expands the AmeriCorps National Service Program and helps other Americans earn money for college by doing volunteer work. Still ahead, a school strip searches a 13-year-old girl. Was it constitutional? The Supreme Court hears both sides. How far can school officials go to keep drugs out of the classroom? At a school in Arizona, they're accused of going too far when they strip searched a young girl. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and today, as she looked on, the justices heard arguments from both sides. Wyatt Andrews was there.
Today, she is in college, but back when Savannah Redding was 13 years old, she was ordered to the school nurse's office and told to strip to her underwear.
And she told me to pull out my bra and shake it from side to side, and the crotch of my underwear to shake it as well.
Middle school officials here in the desert town of Safford, Arizona, had heard that a prescription drug party was being planned. One student said Savannah was hiding prescription-strength ibuprofen, but she was not holding drugs. And today, at the Supreme Court, her lawyers argued the strip searching of students is unreasonable under the Constitution.
To reveal her breasts and her genital area to her school officials, all for what?
The answer, says the school's lawyer, is safety.
There were drugs on campus this day. What was not known is how much and what kind and who was going to take them.
In fact, prescription drug abuse is rampant. More than 2 million students admitted in 2006 they'd used prescription painkillers or tranquilizers, most of it stolen from their parents. School systems already have wide latitude in searching students for drugs and guns, but the justices now have to rule how personal those searches can be. Chief Justice Roberts asked, was it reasonable for the school to suspect she was hiding the drugs in her underwear? Justice Souter seemed to sympathize with any school principal who thinks, I'd rather have the kid embarrassed by a strip search than to have some other kids dead. Most of the nation's school systems have asked the court to keep the option of strip searches open, calling them important to the goal of drug-free schools. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, at the Supreme Court.
Also today, the Supreme Court put new limits on the power of the police to search a vehicle after a stop. In a 5-4 decision, the justices said officers who arrest a suspect and have him locked safely in a patrol car may not search his vehicle unless they have a warrant. Coming up next, they may be retirement age, but they still need to work. What they're doing to stay employable. And finally tonight, the oldest of the baby boomers have started retiring. Millions more are thinking about it, but it couldn't come at a worse time. With the recession, the housing slump, the stock market meltdown, only 13% of Americans say they're very confident they'll have enough money for a comfortable retirement. And about 1 in 5 plans to put off retirement until their 70s. But for older Americans, finding a job can be very difficult, as Ben Tracy tells us as we begin our series, Rethinking Retirement.
When it comes to customer service, Dan Hoffa delivers.
Get out of trouble?
Not really.
Neither am I.
He's a new ambassador for his wife's small natural foods business.
And obviously, I've got a little more time to do it now.
In January, Dan lost his job as a technology sales executive in Portland, along with his 6-figure salary. The market plunge wiped out 50% of his retirement savings. At age 64, his carefully crafted retirement plan suddenly became obsolete. Dan now needs to work for at least 4 more years.
Search, see what's out there.
But despite 14 years of sales experience, he can barely get his foot back in the door.
You've applied for about 60 jobs. How many interviews or callbacks have you had?
2.
Dan is facing one of the toughest job markets in the country. The unemployment rate here in Oregon is more than 12%. But he says a bigger problem is another number, his age. On average, laid-off workers age 55 and over are now unemployed for 25.2 weeks versus 20.6 weeks for younger workers. Employers often worry about older workers learning new skills, their salaries, and how long they'll stay on the job.
How do you think your appearance strikes these younger hiring managers off the bat?
And it's an old guy. You know, what the heck's an old guy doing here? Hi, Sue.
Sue Downs, a laid-off hedge fund employee, thought her looks were dragging down her job search.
I have these lines that...
So this 54-year-old single mom is literally putting her best face forward.
Now, all of this can be taken care of with Botox.
A lot of people over 45 are feeling the same way I am, that they are definitely being excluded from getting a job.
And experts say older workers are going to need to work longer than they planned.
Working longer is probably the most potent tool for ensuring that you have a secure retirement.
Delaying retirement from age 62 to age 67 can boost your savings by 50%, turning $1 million nest egg into $1.5 million.
I think showing that you are committed to your company and you want to be thought of for advancement, not just sort of treading water, is really important.
So to stay employable well into your 60s, you need to adapt to new technology. Don't stop networking, reach out to younger colleagues who could end up as your boss, and stay healthy so you can keep working and avoid costly medical payments. Sue Downs' new look has lifted her spirits.
When I'm walking in a place for an interview and, everybody's 20 years younger than me, I won't feel like I'm at a disadvantage.
And Dan Hoffa feels he won't be unemployed for long.
If you stay positive, I think good things will happen.
One of those things, they hope, is still retirement. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Portland.
And tomorrow we'll look at your 401k and how hidden fees could be eating away your nest egg. And for more on how you can make your retirement more secure, you can go to cbsmoneywatch.com. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.